All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of the Athletics Canada webinar series. So, my name is John LaFranco. I'm the manager of coaching education with Athletics Canada, and it's really special tonight. It's a bit different, so I'm going to just kind of explain how it's different. We have with us tonight Matthew Judd and Jules Porter from the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport, and they're going to lead us through 90 minutes. So, 90 minutes this time, not 60, right? Of interesting material around the topic of the brain, stress, and performance. Um, the setup will be a bit different, and we're hoping for a little more interaction than usual. So you will have access to the chat. So normally you don't have access to the chat, but this time you will. And so when Matt and Jules ask for your participation, please get in that chat and type out your answers. Um, Comme d'habitude, si vous pouvez aussi participer en français. Je vais traduire tel que nécessaire. Jules and Matt don't speak French, but I will any French questions, I will translate for them. We are recording this and we will put it up on our YouTube channel when it's done. Coaches who have entered their NCCP number and are NCCP certified will receive two PD points today because we're over the hour threshold. So extra PD points. So very exciting. So I'm just gonna stop this share. Gonna turn it over to Jules and Matt. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And yeah, please take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And yeah, thanks everyone for having us. Just as I launched this, hopefully you can see my slides. Jules, I can see you right now. Give me a thumbs up if that's looking good. All right, let me have a look at this. Want to make sure I can see real good. All right, perfect. Okay, so like John said, I am Matt. Jules is there. Jules, you want to give everyone a wave? We'll let Jules introduce herself properly in a little moment. But thanks for being here. I'm pumped. I don't know about you, but we're sort of Toronto based. It's light out. It's 7 p.m. and it's light out. Thank God for that. That's amazing. It's feeling really, really good. So it's spring has sprung. Nights are getting lighter. Like I said, I know a lot of you have a lot on your plate like right now. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. That's awesome. So like John said, my name's Matt. I go by Matt or Matthew. That works as well. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm here with my colleague Jules, who you just met. We're from the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. And this session today, just like John mentioned, it's all about using sport to regulate stress and ultimately improve performance for your athletes. Now, as we get started, feel free to also rename yourself. We can't actually see you necessarily, but in the chat, if you want to type in where you're from, maybe tell us your name, what geographic location you're joining us from as well, because we're going to be using the chat a bunch tonight. So let's make sure we actually find the chat and see that it's working. Okay, Tina's saying there's a bit of an echo. If there's an echo for other folks, let me know. We'll try and work on that. But as people are still rolling in, I know this is an optional session for a lot of people, and I imagine that, like I mentioned, we've got a lot going on right now. So I just want to we've got a really cool group. John's told us a lot about you all. We've got some coaches that are working with athletes for the very first time, like getting into the sport for the first time. We've got some coaches that are working with athletes going through some big transitions in their lives. And then we've also got some coaches tonight who are working on sort of national and international stages with their athletes. Now, those contexts sound like they're very different on the surface, but underneath all that, there's a shared reality here. Every athlete that we're working with has a brain. Every athlete that we're working with has a nervous system, and those systems are constantly responding to stress. They're constantly responding to challenge, relationships, the environment. So today we are going to speak to young athletes. We're going to speak to the sports system, but we're also going to spend a ton of time talking about performance because the same systems that help shape a young person or a young athlete's sense of safety and belonging are the same systems that shape their focus, their decision making, and their ability to perform under pressure. At CHJS, our belief is that regulation is not separate from performance, it's foundational to it. So we're also going to acknowledge that sport is this like powerful site for connection and healing, but it also can be a place, and we know this, it can be a place where harm happens too, where people feel excluded or where stress is amplified rather than supported. So hopefully you see that this session today is all about that tension and that opportunity. And I really hope you enjoy it. We got a pretty decent sized group. So, like I say, if we all engage a ton, this will last the full 90 minutes. And if it doesn't, it may go a little bit shorter, but that's totally okay. Okay, let's see if my slides move. They do. Brilliant. Okay, so for those that haven't heard of us, like I say, we're CHJS or the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. We're kind of at that intersection of sport, and we like to say the intersection of sport and brain science. We believe every athlete, regardless of their background, their income, their identity, we think they deserve a sport experience that helps them heal, grow, and thrive. Now, Jules and I will admit it, we are not neuroscientists. Maybe I will be one day, but this content is grounded in neuroscience. It draws on the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, a leading child psychologist and trauma expert, and the Neurosequential Network, which applies neurodevelopmental science to children, families, and communities. Jules and I are just going to help put that into a sport context for you. Now, before I jump in, Jules and I acknowledge also that we do a lot of our work on Treaty 13 lands. We're actually based here on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional home of many other nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat people. Jules and I have been working together for a long time. We know the power of sport, and we know the sort of power and role it can have in healing. And we hope to be working in this for a long time and hoping to see our work rooted in action for a long time to come. Now, I see a lot of you are getting already involved in the chat, and I can see it sort of flying in. There's a lot of people from all across Canada, coast to coast to coast, which is awesome. But in the chat, first challenge for you. Ready to go? Who is ready for a little brain challenge? You can give me a yes, Matt. You can give me a thumbs up. You can give me a let's go. And if you want to say, heck no, I don't want no challenge, you can also say that. There's no forced fun. Elizabeth says she hopes so. Jules is in. Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. I love it. Anyone else up for a little brain challenge? Because this session is going to be all about the brain, I want to fire up and warm up those prefrontal cortexes in a little challenge. Willing to try. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, let's be brave today. Let's not be perfect. Let's just be brave. So in this challenge, I'm going to ask you to say some things out loud. You're going to be doing some speaking out loud. Don't worry, nobody can hear you. And it's totally up to you if you choose to play the rounds. The rounds are going to get a little bit progressively more difficult. You choose how you participate. And every time I'll give you a little time prompt as well. So let's start. Tina's in, Leslie's in, Caitlin's in, Susan's in. Let's go for it. So round one is this. I'm going to ask you out loud to say and clap the number 1 through 26 out loud. And what I mean by clap is this. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to do that from 1 to 26, but you've only got 15 seconds. You feel good? Jules feels good. She's locking in. Okay, here we go. In 15 seconds, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, time's up. Look at that. Michelle in the chat. I beat Jules. That's what I like. These athletics coaches, Jules, I told you there's going to be some competition. All right, let's see who can beat Jules in this next round. So that was round one. Let me know in the chat if you were successful. Tell me if you thought that was a little tricky. Tell me how you're doing. Keep the chat flowing. Let's see if we can all beat Jules in round two. Okay, so now this time we're going to say and clap the alphabet. Hopefully you know your alphabets, but you're going to go from A to Z, but you're only going to get 10 seconds. And we're going to add a clap in there as well. So that looks like this. A, B, C, but this time you've only got 10 seconds. Are we ready? Leslie's ready. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, stay humble, Jules. Stay humble. Michelle. Done it and beat her again. Love it. Love it. Michelle's in there. Okay, right. Round three. Final round. This time, it's our last round. You're going to say and clap one letter and one number in a sequence. So that looks like this. A1 clap. B2 clap. C3 clap. You've got 60 seconds to do this because this is pretty tough. And I already hear you, Michelle. You think this is too easy. If anyone's feeling like they want an ultra challenge, you do the alphabet backwards and the numbers backwards at the same time. So that could be Z 26, clap, Y 25, clap, X 24, clap. If anyone can do that, respect. I definitely can't do that. Okay, so here we go. Say and clap one letter and one number in sequence, 60 seconds. I'll put my timer on my phone. Here we go. Three, two, one, go. Jules is struggling. Okay, you're halfway through. Jules is already finished. She's sweating. Okay, you got 15 seconds left. All right, 60 seconds is too long. Jules, when we do that again, I'm going to give them 45. They're too good. They're too good. But yeah, thank you for playing that with me. Thank you for sort of indulging us a little bit there. No surprise that what that activity was sort of intended to do was to be a bit of a peek into what Jules and I are going to talk about today. Firstly, it was an introduction to stress. Some of you felt more stressed than others, I'm sure. At CHJS, we call that dosed stress. We purposely layered the challenge. We moved from the doable to a little bit more hard. Be very interested to know who did it backwards, if anyone did it at all. If you felt a little stressed, that's good. If you didn't finish, it's totally okay as well. Hopefully, your brain stayed engaged without shutting down. But we're going to talk a lot about stress today, so that's a good start. Second, it integrated patterns and rhythms. Patterns and rhythms are really good at helping us regulate our nervous systems. In this game, it was letters, numbers, in sequences, but in sport, that shows up in everything. Running, dribbling a basketball, passing a ball back and forth. Patterns signal safety, and they also support the learning of our athletes. So we're going to talk about that as well. Thirdly, that game gave us a little bit of choice and a little bit of control. You chose your pace, you chose your level, you chose if you did it backwards or not. That sense of agency, we all know that's the key sort of buffer against stress, especially for our athletes. And a couple of things that we tried to fit in there, but was minimal while we're on Zoom, but things like movement and things like connection. Movement, physical activity, specifically in a patterned or rhythmic way, is really good for helping us regulate and connecting to other adults too. So I love the chat. I love the competitiveness already, feeling like we had a shared experience. That builds psychological safety, and it's the foundation for all the healing sport environments that we create. So as we work through this workshop, we're going to dive into that in way more depth, but I'm going to hand it to Jules because she's going to start with the brain.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Tina and Michelle, for uh, beating me mercilessly. It's lovely to be here tonight. Happy to talk to you about the brain and stress, and hopefully, my hope is some of this content is going to be useful for your coaching, and some of it may actually be useful for your personal life. I've certainly found it useful in mine. So, I would love to start with a low stakes question here and ask everybody in the chat to use a scale of 1 to 5 to tell me how much you know about the brain, stress, trauma, and particularly how stress and trauma affect the brain. So you can throw a 1 in the chat if you're like, I barely know I have a brain, and a 5 in the chat if you're like, I could teach this course, and anything in between is also helpful. And I will not, it's not a test. I won't call on you later. Okay, great. Getting some 2s, some 3s, some 2s. Amazing. Okay, so if you're a 1, 2, or a 3, my hope is that you're going to get, oh, nice. Okay, yes, John, that doesn't count. Okay, so my hope is that you're going to get a few really useful nuggets here that you can apply to your coaching practice right away. If you're a 4 or a 5, I still hope you're going to get some nuggets, but please like add to the chat if you think there's additional content that could really elevate folks' learning or experience. Like join us in this journey. We are happy to have more folks helping us out. Okay, next I would love to just, ground the beginning of this and something familiar before we dive into the science. So I'm wondering if you can think back to your own experience with sport or movement, physical activity when you were growing up. I'm assuming for most of you it was pretty positive if you've taken sort of the route to continue coaching, but I'm wondering if you can just write in the chat what sport did for you as you were growing up. Like, what were some of the biggest impacts it had on you? And it can be a word or a sentence or a few words. How did it change your life if it did at all? Okay, great. It helped me find my people. It gave me a real sense of belonging. It gave me an identity, empower, structure, confidence, friendships. Oh, met lifelong friends. I love this. Okay. This is not surprising to me. Most people who choose to coach sport had really positive experiences in it, though I know sometimes people join the sort of sport movement because they didn't and they're trying to change the game. Uh, what I'm going to make the sort of like argument for today is that sport is all these things that you're talking about, but I would say one of the most under-celebrated but widely beneficial powers of sport really lines up with what Janet has said in there about de-stressing. Sport is one of the most effective tools for developing a better and more well-regulated nervous system. And I think in today's society, kids need that more than ever. As a parent of two teenagers who are both in Athletics Canada programming, I have to say the experience of being in sport is doing a ton for regulating their nervous systems, which are quite inundated by social media and by other pressures that are out there. I should say, like, before I go any further, that when I say the term well-regulated tonight, when Matt and I talk about regulation and dysregulation, we're not talking about how someone looks or like a specific way that people act or whether folks are fitting specific cultural norms. I'm actually speaking about the experience that happens directly in the brain when someone's experienced stress and is feeling that they're recovering or reacting to that stress. That is the regulation is the ability to manage the stress, and dysregulation is the reaction to the stress. So people look totally different. We're going to talk about that a lot today. Like, folks look different when they're experiencing stress. Regulation looks different for everybody, but generally all folks have brains, and all brains respond to stress in very similar ways. We notice the stress, we react to the stress, and then if we're lucky, we return to balance. So at the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport, that's what we think is one of the most powerful tools that sport has, and one of the tools that is, I would say, often the most underutilized. And so we're going to try to drive that home tonight. Okay, let's go. Let's keep going. Okay, so if Matt and I do our job well, let's hope we do, in the next 90 minutes or less than that now, you're going to leave here with a quick brain refresher, because brains are weird and we should learn less about it. And quite frankly, my personal philosophy is that, like, we would all be better humans in society if we really understood how brains work, and we would be much more sensitive and kind to folks who are having dysregulated moments. So I'm hoping we're going to get a little brain refresher and maybe bump some of those 2s to 3s or 1s to 2s. We're hoping you're going to get a new pair of stress goggles that you can wear and sort of understand and see when stress might be running the show when you're working with kids, youth, adults, when you're coaching them or engaging with them. We're going to underline why and how, like, movement is in fact a superpower, and we could be leveraging it even more in the world if we wanted to help folks manage a tumultuous environment that exists out there. And then we're going to provide you with, I would say, like, a bunch of healing hacks. So Matt is going to give you lots of tools to use that hopefully you can integrate into your practices moving forward. Many of them you're going to be like, I already do this, and we're going to challenge you to see how you can tune them up a little bit more or add even more, or model them as best you can for all the coaches who are lucky enough to be around you. So, okay, my job today is to do the brain stuff. So I'm going to go into the big brain refresher and Matt's going to go into the tools. So let's get into it. Here we go. Okay, so one of the most important things to know about the brain is this. Your brain is built by your experiences. The architecture of your brain, how it's wired, how it reacts, how it helps you show up in the world is shaped by what you've lived through. So even identical twins who have the exact same DNA have really different brains. Why? Because they live different lives. They've had tons of different experiences, and those experiences include like positive experiences and negative experiences and everything in between. So some young people and some of the people that we work with are lucky enough to have grown up with a lot of predictability and support, and others unfortunately grow up with a lot more chaos, adversity, or harm. And then there's folks who sort of land somewhere in the middle. Over time, those experiences, those positive and negative experiences, are cataloged by the brain, and they shape what the brain becomes sensitive to and how it responds, especially under stress. I think it's like super important to say this. Like, this doesn't mean that experiences are our destiny. The brain is plastic and use dependent. So the same way I could decide tomorrow that I want to really build my muscles and I go to the gym and really build them and my muscles will change over time, the wiring of your brain can change over time as well. But it does mean that experience matters. And if we work with young people in gyms, in classrooms, in locker rooms, in community spaces, in tracks, understanding this isn't optional. Like, we need to recognize that experience wires how folks respond to stress. So I want to ask you all to take a little reflective moment here and think about two young people that you work with who are approximately the same age. And when I say young, I'm like thinking 29 and under here. So like think of two folks you know, and I'd love you to imagine how different their experiences might be. Think of how different their home lives are, how different their school experiences are, how different their family dynamic is around the dining room table, what happens after school, who their friends are, who their teachers are, how they relate to their siblings. All those little differences, they matter. So, I'm talking about the brain and how it's wired. I think it's probably important for us to show you a picture of the brain and like talk about how it actually grows and develops so that the stress piece is going to make sense. So, okay, the brain is crazy complex. Like, it's incredibly complex, and neuroscientists will say that like we don't understand the brain like even close to the way that cardiologists understand the heart. Like, it's an ever evolving field. So all that to say that like when you see a picture of a brain, it's a heuristic almost always. And what that means is it's like uh, nice, but not accurate. So like the picture you're looking at right now is not an accurate version of the brain, but it's a useful version. No part of your brain is actually any of these colors. But this image does a really good job of reminding us that different parts of the brain develop at different times in our lives, and different parts of the brain have different functions. So, okay, the brain develops from the back to the front, like up and out, like that. The back and bottom develop first. That's the brainstem. You can see it there. It's developed in utero and early childhood, and it's responsible for survival, breathing, heart rate. We like to say if your brain were a house, this is like the furnace and the foundation of the house. It's not impressive to look at, but if it shuts down, you're hooped. It's like central to your house functioning. Okay. So as we move up and forward, the job gets more complex. The middle part of the brain is the limbic system. This is the part of your brain that handles emotion, connection, and memory, and it notices threat. Okay, this is sort of your threat detector part of your brain. And at the very front are the frontal lobes. This is the thinking brain. This is like where you plan, you make decisions. It's where you do calculus and algebra. It's where you coach others from. It handles impulse control. It's like your learning center. It's the part of your brain that decided to be here today, is my assumption. Okay, so this part of the brain, this purple part here, it's not fully developed until the mid to late 20s. For men, it's the mid 20s. For women, it tends, or sorry, for men, it's the late 20s. Sorry about that. And for women, it tends to be the mid 20s. It's not like a universal truth, but what that means is that if you are working with athletes who are anywhere, under the mid to late 20s, chances are it's their limbic system that is running the show, right? It's not that the frontal cortex doesn't exist. Those frontal lobes exist for young people, but they're not fully baked yet. And almost all decision making is taking place from the limbic system. So if you have a conversation with an athlete, or if any of you are lucky enough to have teenage children, and you find that a lot of their decision making is really emotional, or they are, having lots of emotional conversations with you that feel quite inflated, that's not a flaw. That's biologically appropriate. Teenagers operate from the limbic system. Okay, so all brains, neurotypical and neurodivergent, develop along the same back to front pathway. But also, what's interesting is that all information moves in this same way. It starts in the brainstem and makes its way up to the limbic system. And if it's lucky, it hits the frontal lobes of the cortex. That's like the most important thing to know from this slide. So I'm going to tell you an example of how that's worked for me. But first, I want to show you kind of like a deeper version of this brain model. Okay. There are a lot of words on this slide, and the good news is like you don't have to read any of them. Okay, the part of this slide that matters is actually the image. So Matt talked about how like almost all of our work at CHJS is grounded in the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, and this is part of his neurosequential model. And I like to think about it, this is like his version of the brain, and I think it really looks like a funky Art Deco building in the middle of like an urban city center. And the bottom floor is pink and the top floor is purple. And I want you to picture an elevator that runs from the bottom floor to the top. And I'm going to tell you how it works. Okay. So the bottom floor, this is the basement. This is your brainstem. This is where survival, respiration, and heart rate are managed. The middle floors, the green ones, let's call that the lobby. This is where sleep, appetite, emotions, memory take place. And the top floor, for the rest of this training, we're going to refer to the top floor, your cortex, as the penthouse. Okay. This is the thinking brain. This is where learning, decision making, creativity, language, hope, hopefulness hangs out up here. So for learning to happen, for any really deep learning to happen, the elevator has to make it all the way from the bottom floor to the top floor, but it has to stop on every floor on the way up, open the doors, and look out and make sure there's no problem. It can't get to the cortex without doing that. If there is any problem along the way, if someone's feeling unsafe or exhausted or hungry or anxious or disconnected and lonely, or like someone in the room looks like or reminds them of someone who hurt them in the past, the elevator doesn't make it all the way up. And then as a coach, you are talking to the limbic system and not to the prefrontal cortex. Okay, so if someone's elevator is stuck in the middle of their brain in that lobby section, algebra doesn't make sense. Any higher order thinking doesn't make sense. Any coaching doesn't make sense. Not because the person doesn't care, but because the brain isn't in the right place to receive that information. Regulation has to come before reasoning. You can't reason a brain into a state of calm. So I said I was going to give you an example of how this has worked in my own life, and it happens all the time for me, but this is, I'd say, like a little bit of a funny version of how it's happened. My brain working through this elevator system. My eldest kid, she's 16. She has these two ferrets. They're like super stinky, amazing creatures that live in our house. And One day I was having like a pretty emotional time at work, and I came home and I picked up one of the ferrets and I was like cuddling the ferret like you would like a dog or cat, I guess. And the ferret seemed to like fully connect with me. And so like I leaned my nose down to rub my nose with the ferret, and the ferret suddenly like took its giant, terrifying jaw and wrapped its teeth around my nose. And I stood up and there was a ferret hanging off my face and like blood was pouring everywhere. So instantly my brainstem kicked in and I grabbed the ferret's jaw and I removed the ferret. This is my brainstem first. Next, my limbic system was able to activate, and I like screamed my face off and I was crying and freaking out. And only after my limbic system had been able to exhaust a little bit of that energy did my prefrontal cortex or my penthouse kick in. And I thought, I should call my husband and ask him to take me to the doctor so I can get a tetanus shot and get this thing stitched up. Okay, so this is how the brain functions in any kind of stress. The brain will always override thinking for survival, right? One last thing to say about this image here is like, you remember before when I said that the cortex or those frontal lobes, that penthouse, doesn't fully come online until the mid to late 20s. In this analogy, like, it doesn't mean that teenagers don't have a penthouse. They absolutely do. It's just not fully built and it's not a part of the brain that's being used that frequently. There's lots of great stuff up there. But the brain tends to hang out in those middle lobby section more often. So if you're a really great coach and you're working with young people, one of the best things you can do is help them regulate enough and then coach them up there. Invite them up there to have deeper level conversations with you, because that greases the elevator track and makes it a whole lot easier for kids to actually access that part of their brains when they need to in school. And yeah, Michelle, this applies to neurodivergent individuals as well. And we're going to talk about stress responses for all folks. And I think some of the differences are the speed at which they get there and the stressors that destabilize them can be different for neurodivergent folks. Okay, let's go there. Let's talk about what knocks the elevator off course. Okay, so when something stressful or unexpected happens, all humans ask this like really fast question. Our brain says like, am I safe? And I like to think of it, it's sort of like all of our brains have this like periscope that pops up the second there is any sense that we are a little bit unsafe. And it scans the environment and it tries to decide like, what should we do next? So when that periscope pops us up, human beings generally move through the same 4 adaptive stress responses, and we call them the 4 Fs. And I'm sure lots of folks on this call tonight have heard of them before. Can anyone throw into the chat any of the Fs that you can think of that are common responses to significantly stressful scenarios? And none of them are a swear word. Yes, thank you, Leslie. Fight, flight. Can anyone think of, there's a couple more. We've got lots of flight. This makes sense. You're running coaches. It makes sense. Flight is running. Is there anything else we can think of? Freeze. Yes, lovely Sherry. Thank you. There's one more, though lots of folks, it's not quite as commonly in our vernacular, so maybe we'll just pull them up onto the slide here. Okay, so the 4 we're going to talk through are flock, freeze, flight, and fight. Okay, so flock is social cueing. It's like before we do anything else, the periscope looks around for cues, especially from people in charge, to decide how to react. Like a really easy example of this happens very frequently in schools. Fire alarm goes off. All kids instantly look at the teacher. If the teacher is calm, it's like, hey, everybody, it's a drill. Let's line up and go outside. All those nervous systems come back to regulated. If the teacher is like, run for your lives, there's a fire, nervous systems do not calm down. We tend to look to the person in charge. And this is the same for coaches, like for coaching. Athletes look to their coach to determine whether that something they've done wrong is a terrible thing or an okay thing, whether something they've done right is an amazing thing or a not so great thing. So flocking is essentially borrowing calm or panic from the people around us. Now, if our periscope goes up, we flock, and it doesn't calm our nervous system down, the next adaptive stress response we move to is called freeze. So freeze is essentially like we don't have enough information. The system's like, I don't have enough information to decide what to do. So freeze is scanning the environment to try to make sense of what's happening. Okay, in nature, this happens when you're driving in the north and it's nighttime and a deer is in the middle of the road. And, you see the deer, it like pauses and looks straight into the headlights. And if you're like me, I've often been like, get out of the road. Why are you staring at me? Keep moving. But it's actually the deer trying to make sense of what's happening, trying to figure out the environment. Humans do this all the time as well. If you think about like an athlete who you might call on in practice to demonstrate something, but they weren't expecting to be called on, they might go quiet or stop moving. They're not being rude or defiant, but their brain's trying to figure out what to do next. They're thinking like, what's happening? What's expected of me? Is this safe? Freeze is essentially the brain buying time. Okay, so if freeze doesn't calm the nervous system down, then the next adaptive stress response is flight. And flight is like what you think it is, get me out of here. And flight, if any of you ever worked at camp, flight is like when the campers are runners and you're like chasing after them. But with older kids, flight can often be easily misinterpreted. Flight can be a kid leaving practice, skipping practice, going to the bathroom a lot, avoiding training altogether. From the outside, flight can look like avoidance, but from inside the brain, flight is like protection. So if flight doesn't calm the nervous system down or isn't possible, then fight is the last resort. Fight is the like, you have backed my nervous system into a corner and the only thing I can do is fight. And sometimes for kids that looks like punching or hitting, but oftentimes for young adults and older adults, it looks like arguing with what you think is a bad call. It looks like making sure you get the last word. It looks like being really rigid and not being willing to try something new. Fight is a last resort survival mode, essentially. And because it gets confused so easily and so frequently, it can be a huge problem for folks who have had tons of stress in their lives because coaches and teachers and adults often treat it like it's a willful behavioral issue. Lots of kids who get to fight fast are often known as problematic or issued, when in fact it's their nervous system trying to protect them. I should note that there's like a whole other range of dissociative stress responses that folks can have, and those are stress responses that happen to people who have been in exceptionally traumatic experiences and there is no way out. And we're not going to talk about those today, but I think that if we can get the stress goggles on, even just for these four, it helps us recognize that oftentimes behaviors are not what we think they are. Okay, so every human nervous system moves through these reactions, neurotypical and neurodivergent alike. But what changes is how fast it happens, how intense it feels, and how long someone stays in each of these states. And brains that are shaped by trauma or chronic stress or sensory sensitivity often get to fight faster and have a harder time coming back down. There's been a ton of research in Canada lately talking about the number of folks in Canada, kids, youth, and young adults who have experienced some form of trauma in their lives. And the data is looking like 50% of folks have experienced seismic stress in the shape of trauma. And so that just means that if you're coaching a group of kids or young adults or adults, you can guarantee that some of them are having some traumatic responses in front of you, whether you imagine it to be true or not. Okay, so the two takeaways from this slide are this, hopefully, are when a young person reacts really strongly, the brain isn't being difficult, it's doing its job. It's scanning for threat and trying to survive. When that periscope is up, they can't access their thinking. They're not hanging out in their penthouse. So our job as coaches isn't to lecture, it's to help the nervous system settle so that eventually coaching can work. And the most significant issues arise in classrooms, in coaching sessions, in all forms of sport, and also in all forms of parenting, when we misinterpret stress reactions, when we see flight as a lack of commitment to the sport and fight as a willful personality rupture, and then we respond to and coach the wrong people. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. This is I think this is like the last big aha from the brain section here, I would say, like the last piece of neuroscience that I think is important to frame up before we get to tools that help with the brain. But remember when I said that experiences make this like huge difference in how we react to stress, and really they make a huge difference to how we encounter everything. Here's more on how this happens for folks who have experienced lots of significant stress. So typically we experience the stress, we have a dysregulated behavior. So sometimes like our reaction might be we slam a door too hard, or we like say something we didn't mean to say. Our nervous system calms down and we get back to regulated. Okay. We have that experience, we get stressed, we come back down to regulated. But when we're dysregulated, our body is telling us that something, like we have to do something with that stress. And those F reactions help us get rid of some of that stress. But when folks have experienced significant stress or traumatic stress or toxic stress, something different happens. Instead of moving up into the stress reaction and then re-regulating, folks move up into that stress reaction and they stay there. They stay on high alert with that periscope high. So a great example in nature, I've already talked about a deer. Let's talk about a bear here. Okay, let's imagine that you're out camping and you're having this great time camping, and all of a sudden this like bear wanders onto your property. Your periscope goes up, you have one of your F reactions, the bear leaves, you calm down. Bear comes back, periscope goes up, you're having an F reaction, bear leaves, you calm back down. Bear comes back, up, bear leaves, calm down. Eventually it becomes so exhausting. So it's easier to stay on high alert than to come back down. That's a sensitized stress response. It's folks who are always ready and waiting for something terrible to happen. If you think about kids who blow up when you step on their toe, or think about kids who freak out when a ref makes a bad call, we often interpret those kids as having a bad attitude, but lots of them actually have sensitized stress responses. And when you have a sensitized stress response, you get to fight way faster, you stay in fight way longer, and you often have behaviors that people think are way too big for what's going on. Like lots of folks around are like, that, like, come on, it's no big deal. But folks with sensitized stress responses are not reacting just to the foot stepping on them. They're reacting to the history of life that has come before it. And the foot is just one more thing that is stressing them out. I think sometimes learning becomes like a bit stickier if folks give some like real examples. So I'll share like a human example from my own life and hopefully it'll stick. Um, my father has always been like an incredibly calm, well-regulated person, really thoughtful. Really smart. Had a career that required him to hang out in his penthouse all the time. And he's the person in our family with the best memory and probably the highest tolerance for pain. But over the past 3 years, he's had several really terrible experiences that have landed him in the hospital. So lots of emergency rooms, lots of invasive procedures, and none of them have involved his brain at all. They've all involved other parts of the body. And it didn't happen once, it happened over and over. Unpredictable, traumatic, and stressful experiences. And now he's got a very sensitized stress response. He's constantly in a state of fear. If we talk to a doctor or anyone who's trying to talk to his penthouse, he immediately says to me, like, Jules, take notes. My brain is fuzzy. I can't remember anything. If me or a personal support worker or a nurse or my mother try to move him, if we touch just his legs, he screams as though we've chopped them off. And it's because he's terrified. He's like absolutely terrified. And the thing is, the doctors and the nurses who are interacting with him are very frequently perceiving him to have memory problems. They're thinking he's got like dementia or Alzheimer's, but it's really that he's got a sensitized stress response. And they think he's got like a really inflated sense of pain. So they're treating him very differently because they think he's kind of exaggerating everything. But his brain is really spending all its time in survival mode, so everything feels terrifying. Anyway, so it can happen to people over a very short period of time. You could be coaching someone from the time they're 8 till they're 18, and all of a sudden they get a sensitized stress response from something that happened in home and life somewhere, and it can shift their personality quite quickly. So that's how it works. So if we go to the next slide, I've stolen some pictures off a variety of websites that from athletics in Canada. I hope you see some folks you know, or some of these are familiar, but okay, there's lots of implications here. So like when a young person or any of us is reactive to stress, it doesn't just affect how we feel, it changes how we think and how we decide and how we show up in the world. And if you think back to that simple brain model I was showing you, the one that's from Dr. Bruce Perry with the upside down building, where the basement and the middle floors are handling like survival and movement and emotion, and the top floor is handling the thinking. When we're calm and regulated, that elevator goes to the top floor, and it's easy for us to make decisions and for us to engage in coaching and for us to receive the information you're giving us and try to integrate it into our practice. But when stress comes up, it changes the game. And the more dysregulated we are, the less access we have to that penthouse floor. So in this picture here, what you can see is the brain on the right is, I hope it's on the right for you folks, that's highly dysregulated. You can see how little of the brain is accessing that penthouse and how much of the brain is hanging out in that lower part. Regulated folks can really access their neocortex. Dysregulated folks cannot. And at CHJS, we like to say, like, you can't do calculus if you're standing in the middle of the highway, nor should you be able to. You should be dodging and ducking and trying to avoid the cars. Kids and adults who are highly sensitized are always prioritizing reacting over reasoning. And that is not a character flaw. That's biology. And it has huge implications on how they're showing up in the world. And one of the coolest things ever is that through things like athletics, you can actually help rewire the brain. The work that you do with young people has the potential, particularly because some of the way it's organized has so much patterned, repetitive, rhythmic and movement in it because it's got all these key ingredients that rewire the brain. You can do something to change that, which is pretty cool. Okay, so one more thing I'll say about this is I think that like this stuff matters for like the bigger W world. Like it doesn't just matter for sports and coaching and the kids that are the young athletes that you love. It matters like on a sort of more global context because a young person's stress response doesn't exist in a vacuum. It interacts with the environment around them. And how an athlete reacts to stress can shape how they're coached and how they're perceived, and ultimately whether they stay in sport or get pushed out. And most of us, like when we experience stress in small, manageable doses, like a false start in a practice or a missed mark on a long jump or a race that doesn't go as planned, we might feel frustrated, we shake it off, we reset, and we get ready for the next rep. That's a pretty typical adaptive stress response. But some athletes respond differently, and their nervous systems have adapted to this repeated or chronic stress that comes from inequitable systems and unsafe environments and lots of really hard lived experience outside sport. So those same moments, those same false starts or corrections from a coach or a disappointing performance can feel like an actual real threat. And their brain reacts really quickly, sometimes jumping straight to fight or flight. And if you think about athletes that you've worked with who react really strongly to stress, my guess is if you're here tonight for a coaching seminar, you've probably been really warm and thoughtful and kind to those athletes. But most of those athletes in other systems may not have experienced that kind of kindness. They often get labeled as hard to coach or unfocused or disrespectful, and they get less opportunity and less patience, and they quietly get filtered out of sports, out of programs, out of mentorship opportunities, out of school. And it's not a character issue and it's not a motivation issue. It's a nervous system response. But generally, our world is designed to favor folks with more regulated nervous systems. So, what happens is, like these kids, these young people, these young adults, they get punished for this nervous system response that is the result of an inequitable system that's been built by the world. And that ongoing punishment leads to when large groups of kids and young people are having that same experience, it leads to disenfranchisement with school and with the systems that are designed to support them. And even like sort of bigger issues like the ones you can see on the slides there. The achievement gap, the school to prison pipeline, generational poverty. So I've spent the last 30 years of my life working in sport, not just because I love sport, but because what I have seen in Indigenous communities, in refugee camps, in IDP camps all over the world is that if we use sport really, really thoughtfully, we can not just help folks regulate dysregulated nervous systems, but maybe we can even tackle some of these more systemic issues. So Matt's going to tell you how, because all of that was a little bit miserable, but we're getting to the hopeful part. Over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Jules. Yeah, that was great. I love that. It's funny, ironically, all the way through it, my 4-year-old in the background is having a dysregulated moment. So if you hear her, apologies. But let's talk about sort of what we've learned from Jules and what we've learned about the brain and just apply it to our role as coaches. Like our job as coaches, like Jules mentioned, it's to help athletes move up those floors and access that penthouse. Because now we kind of know if we don't do that, much of what we're going to try to coach isn't going to land for them. So there's sort of 3 main buckets that I want to spend the next sort of 20 minutes or so talking about that will help us do that. The first is really a pulse check on sort of what many of you are probably already doing and already know. For athletes to feel safe enough to move out of their brainstem and into those prefrontal cortexes, the environment around them must have all the right conditions to encourage them to do so. We're going to talk about those regulating conditions. The second thing is, as coaches, our job is to teach. And if one of our biggest issues is that athletes are facing not being able to access their thinking brains at really key times, then we got to give them the tools that they can use in the moment to hopefully overcome those moments of stress or anxiety. And then the last thing is, if we've done the other two things well, still things can go wrong. Athletes fall, they fail, life happens to them. So we need to make sure that we know how to respond in the moment. And when you see or when you feel that an athlete is dysregulated, it's an important moment where we sort of adjust our coaching to understand sort of what's going on. And so what I would say to you is, as my own child is dysregulated in the background, all of this stuff, like Jules mentions, is really useful just in a human context, whether you're living with little athletes or big athletes. This stuff is really transferable to other areas of your life. Okay, so let's start with those conditions. So I have three conditions that I want to focus on. None that are going to be like mind blowing, I don't think, to all of you as coaches, but what I intend to do is link them back to what Jules taught us on the brain. Because if we can coach these really, really well, then it gives you a little competitive advantage over other coaches. It gives your athletes little competitive advantages over other athletes. So let's get into them. So let's start with relationships. Now in the chat's been quiet for a while. Let's get it going again. Let's fire it back up. What are some ways right now in your current coaching that you build relationships with your athletes? What are some of the things you do? Like it could be between you and your athletes, could be peer to peer. What are some things that you do to build relationships? Tell me in the chat. Let's see if we can get the chat going again. So Jules, I know you coach a baseball team. What are you doing to build some relationships? Okay, so Vicky says joke with them. Yes, let down your guard a bit, have some fun. Oh, Jules mentioned ask them about their lives. Okay, we're going to talk about that. Ask about their life outside of track. Samantha's right on the money. Play games, tell stories, make yourself relatable, make yourself a real human being. Chat during the warm-up. I think that means yeah, get to know them a little bit. So ask questions, be curious, sort of get to know who they are as human beings, let them get to know who you are. Remember things about them. Yes, help know their not just their names, but who are they really? Show them that you're really listening. I used to have a coach who I would tell him something on like a Saturday, and the next Saturday he'd ask me about it, and my young mind was blown. Like this guy remembers that I had a test, and he wants to know how I did on it. Little things like that. Now, of course, I'm not surprised that that is what came into the chat there. Um, like similar to you, coaching has moved on a ton since I was young and when I was playing sport competitively. So society is obviously a lot more comfortable with mental health issues, athlete well-being, and so naturally we're all a little bit more empathetic. And so building relationships, as we can see on the screen, that comes naturally. I can see in the chat it comes naturally to you. But of all of sort of what we've shared, one crucial thing is that all of these things that we're doing, they're telling your athlete's brain, you are safe here, you belong here. Look around. All these people you can trust because trust is the key. And I want to focus on one of these in a little bit more depth. This is something that needs to kind of be a little bit more authentic, and it might take a little bit of work on your own part to do so because young people, athletes, they know someone's being authentic or not. They've got a pretty good BS button that they like to hit every time. So in the coaching world, you may know this as sort of person first, athlete second type approaches, or coaching the person behind the athlete. This is all about how you make your athletes feel. Your job as a coach is to help your athletes not only get up to that penthouse like Jules talked about, but stay there as well. That means that when they make mistakes or when they fall or when they fail and they look over to you, the coach, they need to know that that error doesn't change how you see them. Because when an athlete has been hanging around in that brainstem, like Jules mentioned, sport itself is their healing mechanism. And the fastest thing that can bring them back down to that brainstem is when they look over a coach that is cold, who's unpredictable, or is unsafe. So what's an example, a really simple example of a human first, sort of athlete second approach in life? It's just encouraging athletes to find their voice. This can be helping them find the language to describe how they're feeling in your practices. Could be just simply opening with a check-in like, hey, how's everyone doing today? Middle thumb, thumbs up if we're feeling good, thumbs down if you're not feeling like you're ready to take on new challenges in our practice today. Or maybe it's drill to drill, like, hey, how was that for you? A green is I'm good, a yellow is like I like that, I'm excited, and a red is that's too much for today. It just lets them know that their opinion and their input matters to you. Like it could also just be as simple as acknowledging as a coach the state of the world that your athletes are living through. Now, I'm not asking you to get political or take sides or, get really heavily into the geopolitical landscape so you can talk to it because that's tough, but just acknowledging that times are tough for our athletes right now and that you're there to make this practice work for them. Like, why am I saying all these things? Like, why do that? Well, neuroscience research strongly states that when we perceive those around us as people who are safe, our brains allow us to lower our guard. That authentic interest that you're showing in your athletes outside of their athletic performance tells them, hey, I am safe with this person on a fundamental level. I am safe with them beyond what happens on the track. And when we create that condition, we encourage our athletes into their thinking brains and they can take on new information. And crucially, they can take risks and they can better execute what it is you want them to execute. Okay, so let's look at the second condition. This is movement. So, as sport coaches, this is one that I'm assuming you feel is like it's easy to utilize to its fullest, but I want to talk specifically about movement, specific movements at specific times, patterned, repetitive, and rhythmic movement. These are the movements that are key to humans and our ability to self-regulate. As Jules mentioned, our brain is built through experience. So in the chat, let's use the chat again. What do you think is one of the first regulating rhythms a human experiences? It's not a trick question. What is the first regulating rhythm that you think we experience as humans? Let's see if anyone can grab it. Jules, you're not allowed to answer. Yes, love that. Oh yeah, Tina says sleep. That's a good shout. It could be you sleeping in utero, but typically it's the beat, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. It's the beat of your caregivers, uh, of your heart, of their heart. So it's telling you sort of as you're there as a young unborn child that you are safe, and typically that paired with your needs being met is some of our first sort of experiences of safety. So that rhythm, that repetition, those rhythms and those patterns are all around us, especially in sport. And it's not surprising why we all know that sport is such a great therapeutic tool. Activities like walking, jogging, rowing, dribbling a basketball, for me, kicking a soccer ball back and forth, taps into my nervous system and it encourages me to settle and I can access those higher levels of my brain. Now, at CHJS, we call this PRR, or patterned rhythmic repetitive movement. And the important thing to note here is that all of us as coaches are using movement, but where I've seen coaches really turn the dial on this, it's when they insert movement that's patterned, repetitive, and rhythmic into high stress moments. So that's during warm-ups, maybe it's before the starting pistol. Because if you expect athletes to be taking on information or looking to execute, then you better be helping them get to that penthouse. And movements are a really great way to do it. And the key is looking for like the right time to do it. So I'll give you an example of how I changed my own practice based on when I learned this. Is that I coach soccer. I've coached soccer for years, but my biggest sort of problem was that I'm a highly emotional person. And so when my team would come off the field after a win or a loss, I'd be straight into them. I'm telling you what you've done wrong. I'm telling you what we're changing for next week. But what I noticed, especially in my younger athletes, is a lot of them would shut down. A lot of them, I could tell, just weren't listening to me. And that used to anger me even more. But now what I know is that what I needed to be doing is looking for moments of high stress, especially like when we just lost a game, and inserting movement into it. How did I change? The minute my teams come off now, I already have our warm down station set up. We go through our jogs, we go through our running, we go through our static stretches. And only when I finish that last static stretch, and we could be talking 10, 15 minutes, do I simply ask, okay, so what happened today? Because I've inserted those movements into those high stress situations because I know that movement will help my athletes regulate. And like Jules mentioned, I need to coax them up to their penthouse if I'm going to give them any instruction or if I'm going to ask them to do anything different next time. Now, the last condition I'll speak to is stress. In the chat, okay, bit of a different question here. In the chat, tell me, what would be something that if I kind of like encouraged you to do it right now, what would be something that sent you from your calm state that you're in right now into a panicked state? And this is supposed to be safe, nothing weird. Just like what is something that if I asked you to do it in front of the people on the call today might make you feel a little bit panicked. While you're writing in the chat, I'll give you my own. Oh, here we go. Put me into a race I haven't trained for. Yes, Caitlin, 1000% for me. Write an exam. Jules nailed mine. That is my worst nightmare. Weirdly, when I'm at karaoke, about 2 hours in, some reason I can sing, but here and now, singing a song in front of you would definitely move me from the sort of like excited phase that I'm in into a panic stage. Definitely. Present to the group, have to speak to the group, late for the check-in time. Yeah, I love that, Judd. Yeah, you're just late. Some people really pride themselves on being on time, making sure that they can predict what's going to happen. So being late could really send people into a panic state. Now, follow-up question for everyone that's writing. Michelle, don't drive to downtown Toronto in rush hour. Jules is laughing because she literally just did this, and that's why she was panicked. She might not make this call. Sorry, Jules, I told them your secret. But follow-up question to all of you in the chat. What are some things that I could do that might help make this a little bit more palatable? So if you were going to do this, what are some ways that I could give you maybe a little bit of control? We can make this stress a little bit more moderate and a little bit more predictable. I'll guess at Jules's. Jules doesn't want to sing in front of the group, but Jules, how about if you come over to my house every Saturday for the next 10 weeks? We do some singing lessons. What about if I say, Jules, you can wear a costume while you sing? Jules, what about if you start singing with three of my friends and we ramp it up to sort of 20, 30, 40, just like, look, Jules is good to go. Yeah, Jules is good to go. Now, thank you for sharing in the chat. Some people are saying, yeah, do it with a friend, give me more steps, more instructions. Yeah, exactly. You get where I'm going with this. Now, what starts out as an overwhelming dose of stress gets chipped away at bit by bit and becomes a little bit more moderate and a little bit more of what we can control. And the same's true for the athletes that we support with their stress. Like resiliency is actually built through repeated cycles of being stressed and recovering, being stressed and recovering, and providing controlled, moderate, and predictable stress. Looks like this on the screen right now, but I really want to drill down into one in particular. So ultimately giving your athletes back control and knowing that sort of they're hanging out in their brainstem, that's a response to losing control. So we're going to try and pass it back to them. How do we coax them back into that? Well, giving an athlete the lead can sound like some of the stuff we've talked about already. Where's this drill for you? How did you find that movement? Is it a one, a two, a three, or four, or five? Oh, it's a one. Okay, let's ramp that up a notch then. Oh, it's a five. Okay, let's slow down and let's simplify this a little bit. It could be, how's this movement for you? Comfort zone, just like I said to you all, panic zone, and understanding where people sit. Questions prompt athletes back up into that upper prefrontal cortex. You're encouraging them back there time and time again. Providing control can also mean adjusting your coaching drills. I've seen coaches do amazing drills where it's like the same drill, three different ways to participate. An easy, sort of moderate, and an advanced, but asking their athletes, I don't care where you're at today, start wherever you'd like, but my challenge to you is try to advance before the end of the time. You're giving them that challenge, but giving them also the control to sort of follow their own destiny on that. So three conditions to focus on: relationships, movement, and stress. Now, we also want to talk about some tools as well. So let's get into that. This is another great visual. At CHJS, we call it our stress dial. It's another helpful way to interpret the brain. You see, sort of depending where you are on this dial is really where you're kind of hanging out in your brain. You see calm down in this sort of purpley blue section. And typically that's sort of when we're regulated. That's the sort of top part of our brain that Jules talked about. We're critically thinking, we're making decisions, we're sort of controlling our impulses. But as we sort of move across, we sort of descend into our emotional brain and then down into our survival brain. But my question to you is, before I put it up in the chat, where do you think on this dial is the optimal spot for performance? Like, where's the optimal spot for performance? I'm interested to hear what you think. Vicky thinks like the sort of alert flock area. Wes thinks the same, yeah. Anybody differ to that? Anyone think they're off there? It's like between alert and calm, maybe for Caitlin. Samantha's definitely thinking it's a little bit higher up in the flock area. Okay, people are there's a consensus. They know they're close. I think calm and alert combo. I love that. Okay, like let's have a look. Let's have a look. Okay, so yes, it's right here, right in the middle of alert and alarm. Now, this is what you probably, when you're coaching your athletes, call the flow state. This location is important to know as a coach because it's, as you can see, flow, it's not calm and it's definitely not fear. It's focused and it's challenged. So it means that our job is to get really good at helping athletes get closer to that flow state. It means let's start with getting them back to the penthouse and away from the fear and the terror that's trapping them in the basement by looking at what are some tools that we can use to help them in that moment. So let's start there. So I've got three short activities for you, and please indulge me in them. Don't worry, nobody can see you while we're doing them, but I'm going to go through them with you. So the first one is breath work. So breathing, I'm sure you all use it already. Breathing helps slow our heart rate, helps regulate our nervous system, and there's a ton of breathing activities out there for you to do, but I want to leave you with one of my favorites. It's also the reason I wanted to do this one today is if you're working with younger kids, especially works with my own 4-year-old, it's a great visual as well. It's called 5-finger breathing, and to do it, you're going to put your hand in front of your face just like this. Now, as you follow through this activity, I want to use one of your fingers on your opposite hand just to really show a visual as you're going up and down your fingers. And what you're going to do is as you go up, you're going to breathe in just like this. And when you get to the top, you're going to hold. And then as you go down, you're going to breathe out. And we're going to go up and down all the way to the end. We're actually going to do this as a group right now. So let's get ready to do it. So hand in front of our face, everyone together, we're going to breathe in. We're going to hold and breathe out. We're going to breathe in, hold. We're going to breathe out. In, hold, out. In, hold, out. And last one, we're going to breathe in, holding, and we're going to breathe out. Thank you for that. Imagine though that you're an athlete. Imagine you're one of your athletes about to go to the starting blocks, and your coach led that with a group and they led it 3 times back to back. With all that we've learned today, you can see the power of something so simple and the ability to help an athlete calm and maybe if they're in that terror stage, move a little bit closer back to the flow state. They've definitely, if you do that, got a better chance of concentrating on what is next. And in athletics, especially in running, what is next is often that starting pistol. So that's breath work. Let's talk about groundwork real quick. Grounding techniques are exercises that help us refocus on the present moment by kind of distracting us from all that other anxious or stressful feelings that we may be having. They often involve us using our senses, and I want to challenge you to try one right now. So take a look around where you're stationed tonight. There may be things in front of you, but just pick something up. I'm going to pick up this. This is my very trendy hipster mason jar that I like to drink from. But what I want you to do is I want you to really think about what it is you're holding. And again, we're going to engage our senses. So tell me, start thinking these out loud and trying to picture these words in your head. What is it that you're feeling? Is it soft to the touch? Is it hard? What about its weight? Is it heavy? Is it light? What about the sensation in your palms? Is it cool? Is it warm? Focus on the texture. Maybe focus on the color. Like, can you describe the color of it? Challenge yourself to get really specific. Like mine is translucent. I can see through it, but it's acting a bit like a prism and I can see all different sorts of colors. What color is the item that you're holding? Is it blue? Is it indigo? Is it turquoise? Go really deep with what that color is. Now, what we're doing here is we're encouraging your brain to access that penthouse. Jules and I I'll give you a real world example. Jules and I led a training for Nike to about 100 different participants in January. And one of the guys that we were co-facilitating with led us through an activity just like that. He actually made us stand in a circle, and minutes before we went live, he asked us to in our brains think about what it was we were feeling and what we were experiencing in that moment. And it wasn't until he did it that I realized, like, oh, I'm petrified, actually. I realized I got a lot of new content to remember, a lot of new information to try and get across. But no, realizing it, giving it a name, labeling it, thinking about it, set me free of it. I came back online and I was able to sort of think through what I needed to do. And the same is true for our athletes. That's why grounding work is really helpful in those high stress moments. So if you're feeling like your athletes need to sort of ground themselves, there's a great example of how to do it. Now, the last one I want to talk through is release work. Release work is something that was sort of constructed by Dr. Peter Levine. He's an American psychotherapist who developed a theory called somatic experiencing. It's all about sort of releasing trapped survival energy, like the fight, flight, or freeze stages that Jules talked about. That builds up a lot of traumatic sort of energy and stress in the body. And examples of that, you may see it sort of you may see that as like in a dog. You know, when a dog shakes after they've been through something traumatic, or when they shake when they're wet, that's the dog trying to release some of that trapped up energy. Now, the body, it's what it's trying to do. It's trying to complete involuntary sort of responses and involuntary sensations. Now, we can do that, and the exercise I actually want to do with you is doing something similar to that shaking dog, but it's actually doing something slightly different, and it's called the VOO sound. And it's part of helping to complete one of those involuntary sensations, and it's essentially the act of humming. And I want to do it with you first. Please stick with me here because this is exciting. This is fun. Okay, so when I say go, what I'm asking you to do is, if you're willing, close your eyes, take a breath or two, and then when you're ready, I want you to start producing a humming sound, or because this is called the VOO sound, try the sound VOO. So it sounds like this. VOO. And I want you to do that for the next 10 seconds. So ready? 3, 2, 1, go. All right, come back to me. Felt good, right? Producing that, you laugh, but producing that low tone sound actually causes vibrations in your chest and in your throat and in your head. But critically, in somatic experiencing, that vibration actually stimulates your vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve, like, what is it? Well, it's a component in the sympathetic nervous system, which is essentially the part of the nervous system that handles your rest and your digestion. And it supports that brainstem function, like heart rate, like digestion, like immune system responses. And it also supports your breathing. Think of it as like a super highway of communication between your organs and your brain. So what you're actually doing there is stimulating this nerve and sending soothing communication from the body to the brain. And research has shown that this type of release work over time can actually help reduce stress. But what's amazing is over long-term use can actually be used to support your heart and your digestion health long-term as well. So remember, tools to help with your athletes: breath work, groundwork, release work. Hopefully, all of those are helpful. Okay, we're moving on. Okay, so in the chat, what I'd love to do is we talked a lot about sort of how we move our athletes from sort of alarmed or terrified back into our sort of flow state. But we obviously talked about breathing, we talked about doing repetitive movements, but what about those athletes that come in just typically flat? What about those athletes that come in like more than calm? What are some of the things that we can do to help them move up into flow? So in the chat, if you've got athletes that are coming in and they're super chill, they're super laid back, they're actually, now that we know flow lives between alert and alarm, what are some things that you typically do that help move your athletes into flow? What are some things that you typically do? Oh yeah, slaps. Slap on their legs, slaps on their shoulders, chest bumps, jumping jacks. Love that, Leslie. I've seen on my travels this year, I've seen a lot of pump up music. I've seen a lot of rousing speeches, seen a lot of challenges. So things to take away from this section is that your response has to obviously differ, and it based on where your athletes are at. So yeah, thank you for everyone for going through those tools with me. Now, okay, so we've gone through conditions, we've gone through tools. Now let's go through how we respond to dysregulation. Because like I said, life is going to happen. Athletes are going to make mistakes. They're going to feel overwhelmed. They're going to shut down. So let's concentrate on what we do to respond. What we've learned so far is that if an athlete is hanging out in their brainstem, we can't reason with them and we can't coach them. So at CHJS, we use a simple sequence that you see on your screen now called calm, connect, coach. It reminds us to do that when someone like an athlete or a kid is dysregulated. We calm, we connect, and then we coach. That we calm the nervous system first, then we connect, and only at that point then do we coach. Other similar like therapeutic frameworks that you might be aware of are called regulate, relate, reflect, and reason. And you can see from the image on the right there that this is a process that's linked to the brain. Each step is designed just to help get that elevator back to the penthouse. Now we're going to work our way through the calm, connect, and coach just in a second. So let's start with sort of calm. The goal here is sort of simple to help the athlete soothe. So we can do a lot of that grounding work. We can do some of that breathing or that release work. They're great tools. But what we can also do as a coach is lend our calm. Now, calm is contagious, but so is chaos. Our brains are wired with mirror neurons, and athletes pick up on that. They pick up on your tone, they pick up on your body language, they pick up on your energy. So if they are escalating and then you escalate, you're not going to fix it. You're just going to amplify it. As a dysregulated adult or a dysregulated coach, you cannot regulate a dysregulated athlete. So, what does mirroring or what does lending your calm look like? It looks like a lower voice, looks like slower speech. It's relaxed body. It might mean getting physically down on their level. For me, this always reminds me of all of those daycare staff that I send my kid to every day. The way that they get 30 kids to sleep in the middle of a hectic day using just their voice. That's not magic. They're just experts in soothing the nervous system. Tips for connection, like once an athlete is calmer, now we can connect. This is where a lot of us jump too quickly to. We try to fix in this moment, but connection is not fixing. Connection is, I see you, I'm here. It can look like listening, it can look like being present, it can look like simple validating language. Like, that looked really frustrating. I'm here. You're okay. Let's go for a walk. I got you. You're not solving anything yet. You're helping them feel safe with you, the coach. If you can do that, if you can connect, sorry, realize that these should be up on the screen as I'm talking through them. If you can do that, then you can move on to coach. So only after calm, only after connection can we now coach. Now the thinking brain is back online, if we're using Jules's analogy there. We've moved up to the penthouse. Now we can ask, what happened there? What do you want to do next? What should we change for next week? What should we do differently? And by the way, this like doesn't mean that there are no consequences. It means consequences just happen after regulation. They don't happen during chaos. So that's a really important thing to remember there. So final tips just for this is that my final sort of key insights are these tools work in real moments. They really can work, but you do need to make sure that your athletes are practicing them when they are calm. You're not supposed to be teaching them when they're dysregulated. So as coaches, please build them into your routines as much as you can. I challenge you to start your next practice with the 5-finger breathing. I challenge you to include rhythmic patterned movements into your warm-ups. I challenge you to normalize these strategies as much as possible so that actually athletes can use them when they really need to. And remember, when an athlete is dysregulated, they're not giving you a hard time, they're just having a hard time. And in that moment, they may really need you. Okay, so we have some scenarios, but I think we're running a little tight on time. Yeah, we are. So, Jules, I won't run through the scenarios, but what I will say is we'll move into our sort of last few slides here. And to wrap up, I just really want to do two things. I hope you really enjoyed the session. I hope you got some stuff out of it and you're taking some stuff away. But Jules and I, at heart, we're coaches. We really want to know what we did well. So, if you're willing, shoot us an email, tell us how we did, write it in the chat. That's also super helpful. We'd love to know what are pieces from this you think we should amplify, what are pieces for this we should take away. And that would be super, super helpful. Also, on the next slide, there's a QR code that I'm going to give you right now. If you want to scan this, it will take you to a page where you can actually get a digital accreditation for this. You get a certificate that you can print out and you can use it on your LinkedIn. You can use it in your coaching, whatever you would like. But on behalf of sort of Jules and I, thank you for being with us tonight. Thanks to John and the team at Athletics Canada for having us. It's been a blast. You've been an amazing group. You've had some really, really cool sort of insights and questions in the chat. Thank you for being here. And I'll unshare my screen. And John, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Thanks so much. That was such a fun and engaging and informative session. Exactly what we wanted. So thank you both. Um, thanks to all the coaches for I don't know, just being you. I know them and I'm not surprised at all by how cool they are. So good job, everybody. Um, Yeah, that's about it. For those, just I guess, just to make a little bit of a link for those who are in the mentorship program, we're going to be seeing Matt and Jules again in September in person. So to do more similar stuff. So that's going to be fun. So um, yeah, no, really appreciate it. I said I did this before, but I feel like I learned something again because I don't know, maybe I wasn't paying attention the first time. But no. Fantastic stuff. There is 5 minutes. I don't know if anyone has wants to pop questions in the chat or anything. I'm just seeing a lot of thank yous, which is great. No, we're good. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll be seeing you around soon.